Independent films beget independent music type of soundtracks.
Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence.
Sometimes, I'm complained by some film directors that my music is a little bit too overwhelming.
Morricone and Leone may be the greatest composer-director collaboration in the history of film.
I wonder really whether directors go to composers and say, read my mind.
He said, oh, just make it timeless. Make it like the wind. Make it like the sea.
I think there is a certain simplicity in my writing that I would take to be one of the signatures of what I do.
One of the most important things I find that I need for someone who scores for me is they gotta have a great melodic sense.
I think I'm probably one of the few composers in Hollywood who's clawing his way down the ladder, as it were, trying to get myself hired onto no-budget films.
I wanted to write a piece for 3 harps, and Crash is really a piece that's written for 3 harps.
I do think that contemporary filmgoers are sort of conditioned by virtue of what they've seen and heard in the past. That doesn't make room for innovation and change, which we're seeing much more, I think, on the independent side than on the side of the commercial studio films.
Working in the independent sector, there are advantages and disadvantages. You've got more freedom, and you're prepared to take more chances, but you're also, of course, working all the time against budgetary constraints.
That doesn't mean there isn't room for innovation and change.
Strange, sometimes when you have less money, you become more inventive.
Independent films, which is the sort of film cinema that I'm involved with, is trying to be innovative and visionary about what they're doing.
When you're working in an independent film, there tend to be fewer people in authority over the project. In other words, there may be a producer and a director, but there aren't 7 producers and a director. And consequently, you have less people to get on board with whatever ideas you're coming up with.
The upside of the independent film is that generally you're able to experiment. The score can be, for lack of a better word, avant-garde or quirky. Different instruments, maybe smaller.
So there's a much more experimental approach than there tends to be in studio films.
While there have always been independent, spirited producers, it was not until the late 60s that the younger generation began to make themselves felt in movies. One of the first blows for youthful rebellion was struck by The Graduate, which featured a pop soundtrack by Simon and Garfunkel. But The Standard Bearer, which mounted a full-scale assault on the values of the old Hollywood system, was an extremely low-budget picture whose soundtrack album became an essential item in any self-respecting young person's record collection. Easy Rider.
Get your motor running. Head out on the highway, looking for adventure. And whatever comes
Easy Rider was an incredibly significant film. It broke down an awful lot of barriers.
For a mainstream feature to collage existing tracks and to simply find sort of semi-abstract imagery to illustrate them, people, riding full whack through Monument Valley or shoeing a horse while someone changes a wheel on a motorbike or throwing their watches away, or all these great moments punctuated by rock music, was something very, very new.
It was as though it had sucked in everything that was just happening into itself, and that included music that you would be hearing in your car on the way to wherever you were going. Now it was inside Easy Rider. You were inside Easy Rider as well.
Things had changed, but no one had articulated the change, and that film did it.
I'd rather go and journey where the diamond crescent's glowing and run across the valley beneath the sacred mountain and wander through the...
One of the things that happened with Easy Rider was, because they had very little money, they did sort of filch songs from the time and slap them in all over the place in the film.
Before then, soundtrack albums were specially written music, and on the whole, you needed the image to make any sense of them. These are found examples of rock music that had already been recorded, with one or two exceptions, put together in a collage, and they were freestanding things. I mean, they'd come out for a different purpose, so you could enjoy them for their own sake.
That led to a much wider understanding on the part of the film community that rock and pop songs not only could fit a movie, but help sell and promote the project at the same time.
I think that, in a way, was the death knell for serious movie music for quite some time, because all anybody wanted to do was put rock and roll in their movie as a sort of a drop needle soundtrack.
And when it's time, I'll go and wait beside a legendary fountain till I see your form reflected in its clear and jeweled waters.
And now, about a third of movie soundtracks are collage soundtracks of found music, and that's where it all began.
Some 20 years later, Spike Lee's film Clockers drew heavily on hip-hop music to create an atmospheric backdrop for his tale of drug dealing amongst the housing projects and streets of Brooklyn. The main score was written by long-term musical collaborator Terence Blanchard, who composed a hauntingly beautiful score to provide a stark contrast to the desperate subject matter of the film.
Clocker is a low-level, low-rung drug dealer. It's not the big cats. This is the guys out there on the street, 24/7, clocking dollars. You clocking out, you put in your time card, clock hours, and you're clocking dollars. Low, low, low level.
You are selling your own people death.
I really wanted this to be an anti-drug, anti-violence film.
In order to escape the pressures of his drug-dealing life on the streets, Strike, the main character, finds solace playing with his elaborate train set.
This guy, Strike, is a drug dealer who's kind of heavily affected by what he's been doing in his life. Really is trying to find a way out of this lifestyle. And right now, the only place he has is his home, where he has this train set, where he can go for some sort of relief from all of the other things that he's been involved in.
Fattest shit we got today.
Let me see. Yeah.
The interesting thing about the scene is that while he's seeking relief, we actually cut back and forth to all of the things that he's been heavily involved in terms of selling drugs to pregnant women, selling drugs to everybody on the street.
Those weren't extras in the film either. The ones purchasing the crack, those are real crackheads.
Come on, let's do this.
I'm getting tired of these nickels, man. Put it down.
It's painful. One of those ladies is pregnant too. You know her child was either going to be born dead or born addicted to crack.
It's an interesting montage to witness. You start to wonder if these guys have any kind of emotions in terms about the things that they've been doing, you know, how they have been affecting other people's lives. And I particularly love this scene because it shows a human side, if you will, to this guy who's been doing so many bad things in life.
I remember particularly that sequence in the film. When I was mixing it, it had a real emotional effect on me because I felt the desperation in that life. And I think that a lot of that had to do with the score. I saw that scene without any music, and it wasn't the same. When the score was brought in, it suddenly took on a whole other dimension. And you had that sort of soft piano playing, and then when you would cut to the scene of the girl smoking crack, the low elements of the orchestra would build. And it was just beautifully composed.
With the music, I was trying to uplift these characters. I was trying to show a real human side to them. I didn't want the music to be, I didn't want it I didn't want any cliches in the music, you know. I wanted to take a fresh approach. That was Spike's idea behind the film. You know, we were trying to take a new approach in dealing with these stories, because all too often when you talk about these stories, they have a hard edge to them.
In addition to his busy schedule as a film composer, Terence Blanchard devotes much of his time to nurturing young musicians at the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz Performance, part of the University of Southern California, where he is artistic director.
Improvising, you're composing all the time, and you're taking little ideas and you're manipulating them into various forms. That wasn't the hard part. The hard part of making an adjustment was trying to stay within the context of the story. You know, because, you know, you get so excited, man. You have all of these instruments at your disposal. You're like, man, I can do this, I can do that. Whenever I step on the bandstand, even though we may play certain tunes, it's all about my impressions of how I feel that day. So that can change at any moment. But when you're dealing with a scene, the story is there. You have to help the director tell his story in the best way possible.
While Blanchard came to film composition from a jazz background, Ryuichi Sakamoto had previously carved out a successful career as a rock musician with the Yellow Magic Orchestra. For Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, he wrote the highly memorable East Meets West score. This film was to launch his career as a film composer and was the first of several collaborations with producer Jeremy Thomas, including Oscar winner The Last Emperor.
He's a wonderful composer and a very, very intelligent musician who is also a professor of music and a classical musician, apart from being a rock star and a generally sort of innovative musician with sounds. So he's a very ideal combination of skills to be a composer. In fact, he hasn't done very many scores, but he, when he applies himself to doing a film score, he really can give you something very special.
I never thought, I would work on a film project until I got this offer from Nagisa Oshima for Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. But what he offered me was to act. So I offered myself to Mr. Oshima, to write music. And he immediately said yes.
As a representative of the British Air Force, how many experts in weapons and guns do you have in your group?
The soundtrack was much loved and admired. And in fact, you still hear it a lot today, the main theme of Merry Christmas. And that was Sakamoto's first soundtrack, and that was an awesome debut for a composer. And Sakamoto said, how on earth shall I make this score? Because I've never done it before. And he said, well, I want you to compose a score. I like the character you are in the film. Because the character was very strange, had a sort of strange point of view, and was a very unusual personality in the drama of the film. And therefore, he was composing the score. His instruction was, you just compose the score like your character's head, not who you are. So I think that was very good advice for Ryuichi, and well, anyway, it came out what he did.
I remember one day when we were shooting Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence on an island in South Pacific Ocean. I just looked through the lens of the camera. I heard something in my mind. It was a beautiful moment for me. The memory of that moment worked a lot.
When you have electronic music in a movie that takes place in a past, like Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, it's a way of, it's like you're viewing the story through a telescope, and even though it has a very specific historical setting, it's showing you that what is important are universal and timeless emotions that are not specific to that stuff.
Sometimes the emotions of a film are not so familiar, and with David Cronenberg's film Crash, Howard Shore's score helps lock the viewer into a disturbing world populated by characters obsessed with auto accidents. The metallic-sounding instrumentation resonating with the sound of colliding vehicles.
When I work with Howard, I don't say this should feel like, you know, Vertigo, or this should feel like River. You know, this is an epic, and we really try to dive into the specific movie and find what's really there.
At the beginning, it's really intuitive. He lets his collaborators really express themselves fully.
One particularly disturbing scene in the film shows the lead characters photographing their friend's fatal reenactment of the Jane Mansfield crash.
I wanted to write a piece for three harps, and Crash is really a piece that's written for three harps. One step further, one musical step further, was to get a louder sound from the three harps, was to record them with electric guitars. It was an abstract piece. It wasn't a piece based on a specific scene in the film. It was just that, it was something created from the idea of the feeling of the film. This is such a specific place, and you wanted to be a part of it as much as when you come to New York and you see a yellow cab, that's a part of New York. So you want to feel that the music, the cinematography, direction, all a part of one piece. When you look at Crash, you're in that world. Actually, when I was in the studio going through this experiment that I was interested in, he came in one day and he went, "Oh, electric guitars, right, cars, electric." And I looked at him like, oh, of course you're right, as if I had had the thought, but I hadn't. It was really just the sort of musical progression that took you there. And he allows that, and I'm overjoyed to be able to allow that kind of creativeness to be able to do that. And I think that's what you see in his films.
The general Hollywood tone is usually go after whoever's hot, whoever had a big success, whoever is getting the most press. That's who you want for your composer, for your actor, for your cinematographer, and so on. The more European style is that you develop very deep and profound relationships with people, and you explore those more and more. It's, monogamy as opposed to promiscuity, I suppose, in a way. There are two ways to do it, and you get a different result.
The idea of reflecting the environment in a movie score is one used by a number of distinguished composers. In the 1960s, a series of low-budget films from Italy captured everyone's attention. The movies of Sergio Leone, made with his lifetime musical collaborator Ennio Morricone, revolutionized attitudes to both music and film.
even as wonderful as the Hitchcock-Bernard Herrmann collaboration was, it almost isn't even comparable to how important Morricone was to Leone and Leone was to Morricone. In fact, it's almost, you can't even, you can't even imagine the movies without Morricone's music.
Morricone is now widely regarded as one of the world's most important film composers, having written nearly 400 film scores and been nominated for 5 Oscars.
Io scrivo sulla scrivania, non al pianoforte. In generale chi scrive al pianoforte è un po' un dilettante. Si scrive alla scrivania, io vado direttamente in partitura sulla scrivania. Naturalmente prendo appunti all'inizio per farli sentire al regista dei temi, della tematica musicale del film.
When Fistful of Dollars came out in 1964 in Europe, everyone was used to westerns having very symphonic scores, lush music, over-orchestrated, folk tunes that were sort of pumped up for a symphony orchestra. And suddenly they got this movie that sounds as if it had been recorded in a bathroom with whistles and whip cracks and Fender Stratocaster electric guitar sort of riffs, incomprehensible lyrics, oh, get back, you know, on this, and insist, ding, 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 sort of horses. And I thought, what is this?
Guardi, io vengo da un'esperienza prima del cinema, da un'esperienza di musica d'avanguardia, anche sperimentale. E la musica d'avanguardia sperimentale spesso ha tentato di recuperare suoni extramusicali, cioè suoni che non facevano parte della musica, dei timbri ufficiali della musica.
Notwithstanding Morricone's undoubted creativity, another important element in creating the sound for his Western scores was musician Alessandro Alessandroni. In addition to the innovative nature of the music, Morricone also pioneered an unconventional method of working with Leone.
Ho scritto prima e mi piaceva scrivere prima perché il tempo per il regista che ascolta lo aiuta a capire la musica, anche quella più strana e più difficile, quella che non si aspetta. Quindi la cosa era molto graziosa anche per questo, non solo per un fatto di ispirazione, ma anche per questa ragione che ricollegava il set di Leone ai primi film muti che si usavano dalla musica casuale del pianoforte preesistente del pianoforte per evitare il rumore, il disturbo per gli spettatori della macchina da proiezione.
Just before the camera was rolling, he put the music of Jill in the film, and then he stopped and we go. And then we were in the mood. It was so fantastic for all of us because it gave you the energy and the poesy and everything. And it was so easy after to act and to become the personage, the character of the film.
Its apotheosis was the moment where Cardinale arrives at the station at Flagstaff in Once Upon a Time in the West, where she gets out of the train and you get this long tracking shot, dolly shot, as she walks along the platform and goes to the station master's office. And framed with a CinemaScope window, of course, because you've got to have a widescreen effect with Leone, she talks silently to the station master. Then, having reached the end of the track, the camera goes up on a crane, and the crescendo of the music is exactly timed to the timing of the crane as it goes up over the station master's office. don't think anybody's ever attempted that before. It's a mad thing to do, really. But it gives this quality of the whole movie being a very stretched rock video, in a way, that you feel the movie revolves around the music rather than the music revolving around the movie.
La musica e il cinema hanno la possibilità di vivere insieme in maniera positiva. Qual è questa ragione? La ragione è che vivono tutte e due, cinema e musica, di un unico identico elemento, la temporalità. Se un regista rispetta la temporalità nel suo film, e la musica avrà lo stesso rispetto e lo stesso spazio che il regista dà alle sue immagini, allora la musica sarà riuscita. Altrimenti, se questa temporalità dei due elementi sonori, uno del visivo e l'altro sonoro, non è rispettata, una delle due arti soffre, e in genere soffre la musica.
Morricone doesn't like the phrase horse opera. I think he thinks it's a put-down, but I think it's the ultimate horse opera. An opera, as someone said, where the arias aren't sung, they're stared.
Just as Leone created a new view of the West, so the films of the Coen brothers frequently provide a viewpoint of life that is offbeat and unfamiliar. Their favorite composer, Carter Burwell, arrived in New York in the early 80s to pursue a career with a rock band. On the advice of a friend, he sent a tape to the Coen brothers, who are looking for someone to score their first. His subsequent score for Blood Simple was the beginning of a long-term relationship in which both he and the brothers have matured in their creativity.
Joel and Ethan Coen started making commercial films. They discovered Carter Burwell very early on. Pictures like Blood Simple and Barton Fink. And Burwell brought a very different sensibility to these films and these scores, which has basically propelled him into the A-list of film composers today. Fargo is a great case in point because there's this sort of lovely Norwegian melody that is the basis for a lot of that score. But by the same token, Burwell brings his own, sometimes offbeat, quirky sensibility to that score, which basically marries that unusual music to that film in a way that no other composer would have done.
One of the early steps in writing a score for me is once I've got a melody that I like, which usually comes from the piano, I then come to the synthesizers, which you have here, and the computer, and start to put that melody on a sound that sounds like the instrument that will actually play it in the end. In other words, for the fiddle sound, the fiddle melody in Fargo, I got a synthesizer sound that sounds like a fiddle. It's a violin played without vibrato. I then added a bass, a double bass being played pizzicato, and a celeste, which is sort of a piano with bell sounds accompanying the fiddle. It sounds like this. And there's also a harp there and pizzicato cello. I really react very strongly to the actual sound rather than the concept. And so, of course, do most directors that I might be playing this for. The film takes place in sort of snowbound part of Minnesota. And the characters are, it's just the nature of Minnesota demographically, as a lot of the characters come from Scandinavia. They're descendants of immigrants from Scandinavia, and they have those types of names. And in searching for some kind of sound for the film, I basically had two ideas. One was to look at Scandinavian music and see if there was something there. I was already somewhat familiar with Scandinavian fiddle music. They have an instrument called the Hardanger fiddle, and it's also a style of playing called Hardanger fiddle playing. There's a certain coldness to the sound of the instrument. It's partly because that fiddle, in addition to having the strings that you play on, has a set of strings that lie underneath that aren't directly played, but they vibrate sympathetically with the playing strings. So they give off this shimmer. I think the first time statement of the melody is actually done with harp. Then the melody is restated, this time by the Hardanger fiddle. And then when this car appears over a hill, which is Bill Macy's car, he's on his way to arrange the kidnapping of his wife, but we don't know that. As far as we know, it's just a car in the snow. Then the bombastic true crime drama music begins. For me, it's funny that nothing is really happening on screen, and the music is doing all these different things. It's very delicate, it's a little ethereal, it's haunting, and then it's big and it's bombastic. And it creates this impression that, wow, something must be happening, or something is going to happen. It sort of, you know, gets you ready for excitement. And then when you start, you know, the next thing you do is you hear the kind of Minnesota accents of these people in their, you know, horribly cheery manner. And it's, again, hopefully there's humor just in that contrast between the music taking itself so seriously and the characters all seeming kind of silly.
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
Yeah.
Fargo was actually the biggest musical challenge, perhaps, that I'd had, because it had to... I wasn't sure whether the music taking itself completely seriously was going to kill the comedy in the movie or help it. We suspected it would help, but it wasn't entirely clear, or whether people would just think, what is this music doing? You don't want the music to really just pop out of the film and not match the film, not seem to be part of the same world as the film. So it seemed like a bit of a risk to do it, but the only way to do it was to do it 100%. You had to have the music just be completely serious all the time. It could never be any different. It could never crack a smile. And that's the approach that we took.
The fact that the Coen brothers have stayed with Carter Burwell throughout their filmmaking career is a testament to how well he has done his job as composer of the film. Pictures with as different a sensibility as The Big Lebowski and Barton Fink all benefit, I think, from Carter Burwell's unique and unusual sensibility musically.
Rock music also provided the launching pad for composer Danny Elfman, who enjoyed considerable success with a rock band before discovering a kindred spirit and a long-term collaboration with director Tim Burton.
One of my most important lessons is never travel without a tape recorder to a first glimpse at a movie. And I'm going to be getting ideas right on the spot, and half of my best stuff has been on the car coming home. And I know that I won't remember it until I get home. So I'm carrying a tape recorder around me, and I'm talking into it, and I'm singing into it, and I'm creating stupid rhythmic sounds with my tongue and my mouth. And, you know, here's an idea for a pattern that could be expressed French horns, and I'll start to be singing something. And then I'll go a third and a fourth layer. It's a little tricky when I get back, because they're all separate. But as I'm imagining them, I'm doing them in a way that, well, if you put this on top of that, and put this on top of that, and then top it all off with this, could be pretty interesting. Then I'll get home and I'll start actually playing with those ideas.
Elfman has musically matched Burton's quirky sensibility, and in Edward Scissorhands, his score underlines the romantic naivety of the central character.
Tim and I are just lucky enough to have a similar aesthetic. We grew up on the same kind of movies. We had a lot of similar vocabulary in terms of our own skewed view of reality.
Those are your hands.
Edward's music, I think, was very inspired by Russian classical music and fairy tale and Tchaikovsky and Russian folk. I don't know why. I mean, obviously there was no link to that part of the world, other than, to me, that's the heart of where all the best fairy tale imagery comes from. As often happens, Tim flew me in early. They were still shooting. I sat and I watched them shoot for a day, and the editor then played me half a dozen scenes. It was a little tricky because at that point, the scenes I was looking at, I was watching, were more the suburban side. And I was still struggling to find out what is Edward and who is he. And it took me a little while on that one to really find the heart of the character. And two thematic ideas began to evolve. And then I began this torturous process of trying to choose which one is Edward, and I realized they both were. And so I actually had two themes that were both Edward's themes. One was the fairy tale side of this character in the story, and the other was this kind of sweet emotional side of this kind of like childlike thing that played his innocence.
Once taken in by the suburbanites, Edward discovers that his skills with his scissor hands are much appreciated by the neighbors.
I started with a Spanish theme because of the bravado that Edward seemed to have in his movement, and there was something about it that was matador-like. And so I just found myself falling into this matador-esque piece, but then as it started moving and moving and moving, I fell right into, I listened to lots of gypsy music, and so again, this thing just found itself becoming a wild gypsy dance, and I even tried bringing in some gypsy instrumentation, and there was no reason for it other than just the love of putting that music behind his actions, and I liked giving him that kind of flair. It was very lovely because, first off, for a change, I wasn't competing with sound effects, and that alone makes me just about the happiest composer on the planet. You know, the knowing that I'm not going to get creamed at the end, because 3 out of 4 times when I compose at the end of the day, I'm terribly disappointed, somewhere between terribly disappointed and suicidal. Somewhere in that range is how I usually fall. And then there's that 1 out of 4 movies that I actually feel like the labors that I put into it were there for a reason. And Edward was certainly one of those.
I have a present for you.
It was one of the first times I felt that, God, I wish there would be a sequel to this. I know there never will. But I could have elaborated on his themes more. I wasn't done.
I think Danny Elfman on the early Tim Burton films was writing very strange little scores that were kind of odd and quirky and slightly jolly, and at the same time darkly jolly. And I think that's the kind of what you're looking for with a score with Independence is to kind of emphasize the fact that what you're hearing isn't what you're going to be hearing if you pay money to see a big studio film.
The films of David Lynch have more of a nightmarish quality than fairy tale, but again he found a long-term partner in Angelo Badalamenti.
There's definitely an identity, Lo Badalamenti sound. There is a darkness about it, but, you know, I like to consider it a beautiful darkness or a tragically beautiful world, and I love it.
think Badalamenti and Lynch worked together like Federico Fellini and Nino Rota used to work together. You know, that it's a perfect blend of the two, sight and sound, and it sort of lures you in. The images are just off.
Yes, that's a human ear, all right.
And so is the music. You know, just off, and off enough to be, I better pay attention to this because it may not be what I think it is. So you're on edge through the whole film.
Although their work together has produced some of the most memorable and idiosyncratic scores, for Badalamenti, his first experience working on Blue Velvet didn't seem that promising.
David wanted a song, I believe, by the Cocteau Twins for Blue Velvet. And Dino De Laurentiis did not want to spend the $50,000 for the synchronization rights, which would be the publishing and the master rights. And the producer came to me and said, Angelo, can't you write a song? You know? I said, yeah. I said, but the trouble is that I really don't write lyrics. I can do music, but don't write lyrics, so we would need a lyricist. And I had the good sense to say, why doesn't David Lynch write some lyrics, since he would know what he wants to say.
The idea that I'd sing to Angelo and he'd write the song that's going to make me, you know, happier than the one I want is absurd.
Isabella comes into New York City, where I record her with a little band on Blue Velvet, and she brings this little piece of yellow paper, and on it says, Mysteries of Love. And I look at this lyric, and it's not a lyric at all. There are no rhymes, there's no hooks. It's not, I'm used to being a songwriter where you really lock into a thing. And I just thought it was the most awful thing I ever saw in my life. And I was sorry that I requested that David, do a lyric. And because obviously this is not going to be anything. So I did, once again, being Brooklyn smart. I called David Lynch and said, David, what a beautiful, fantastic lyric. What genius. I love it.
In Angelo's mind, he tricked me because he said once someone's involved with their own lyrics or something like that, they're going to be more predisposed to liking the thing.
So I said, well, now what kind of music? And he said, oh, just make it timeless. Make it like the wind. Make it like the sea. Let it just float. Oh, I see. Of course, I had no idea what he was talking about. But anyway, I wrote Mysteries of Love.
He wrote this beautiful music, and he got this girl, Julie Cruz, to sing it.
And it just turned out to be a gem.
It's a strange world, isn't it?
Angelo did, a beautiful job, and I love Angelo as a person, on top of everything else. And he can write the most beautiful melodies you've ever heard.
I was, into fast tempos. I mean, I was a pop songwriter and a soul songwriter. I used to write songs for mostly in days before I got involved with films. I used to write mostly black-oriented songs, pop soul, for people like Nancy Wilson and Melba Moore and Nina Simone. And so, my style was something maybe a little more upbeat. And when I met David, David would just say, Angelo, no, can you play, I love what you're playing, but can you play it slower?
A lot of things I think are played too fast. And then if they would just slow down, they would be way more beautiful.
It started something new for me, and then my sound came out of that. But there's a very, very funny line. There's a great New York jazz drummer named Grady Tate who played on most of my sessions, certainly on Twin Peaks. And he said, every time I come to an Angelo and David session, he said, I play in two tempos, slow and reverse. David would just describe a scene, for instance, Twin Peaks, and he would say, okay, there's a character named Laura Palmer, and she's a beautiful girl, but she's kind of a lost soul, and it's very dark, and we're in the woods, and it's at night, and just, you know, listen, there's an owl in the background. And he said, can you just start playing something dark?
And little by little, Angelo will get onto the track. And once Angelo's on the track, then he just explores that avenue and winds that avenue out, and we're home free.
Now, there's a beautiful girl that's coming out from behind the tree, back in the distance. Can you kind of build something, get out of that darkness, because she's so beautiful, and just keep the mood? And I would just go up the keyboard, and boom, I would start getting into another thing. And he would say, that's gorgeous, keep it going, keep it going. Now reach a climax, and you'd reach this climax. And now she's coming in, and she's coming closer to the camera, and you build to that, and then now take it down to back into the dark woods, because she's out of frame now. And I would play it, do about 6 or 7 minutes of it, and David would say, boom, stop the tape, Angelo. You just composed Laura Palmer's love theme from Twin Peaks, and don't change a single note.
Since the studio films are now getting more interested in different approaches, and a lot of the filmmakers I work with made independents and are now making films for the studios, it means that we're able to carry that original sensibility, that sort of interesting and quirky openness. We can take it with us into the filmmaking for studios.
Perhaps then it's not the size of the budget, but the spirit of collaboration between those with an independent spirit, which helps to nurture innovation. Independent filmmakers are those who are willing to fight for their vision, and the composers they work with are most likely to be those who share their passion to discover the most expressive means to illustrate the stories they are trying to tell.